Welcome to The Story. I'm Brittany Folkers in for Pat Doris, who's on vacation this week. You know, rumors have been swirling around the Pacific Northwest about a possible serial killer who targets women. It's a story that's exploded online, with national media outlets picking it up as well. Our team has, of course, been digging into this, bringing you news stories every time a new detail comes to light. And it's our big story tonight. Now, this story is one that unfortunately just still seems to raise more questions than offer concrete answers. 4 women found dead in and around Portland in just a matter of months. Police have not named a suspect or charged anyone in connection to their deaths. They do, however, have a person of interest who has a connection to all 4 women, though what exactly that connection is remains unknown. That man has been identified as Jesse Calhoun, and he's currently in custody on unrelated charges. Investigative reporter Evan Watson tells us more about this person of interest and has a timeline on events to help answer the question, how did we get here?
In June of 2021, Jesse Calhoun, who was serving time for burglary, car theft, and assaulting an officer, had his sentence commuted by then Oregon Governor Kate Brown. Brown was giving early release to inmates who helped fight wildfires in 2020. In July of 2021, Calhoun was released from custody. He was scheduled to get out in the summer of 2022. Now to this year. Police found Kristen Smith dead in Portland in February. She had been reported missing by her family in December. Charity Perry was found dead in East Multnomah County on April 24th. Bridget Webster was found dead in Polk County about a week later on April 30th. Then a week after that, Ashley Reel was found dead in Clackamas County. On June 4th, the Portland Police Bureau released a statement saying it had no reason to believe the deaths of these women were connected at that point. PPB said it was in contact with other law enforcement agencies to consider possible connections. Just 2 days later, on June 6th, Clackamas County deputies arrested Jesse Calhoun in Milwaukee for parole violations. On June 30th, Multnomah County District Attorney Mike Schmidt sent a letter to Governor Tina Kotek asking her to revoke Calhoun's commutation, which would make him serve the rest of his prior sentence. Kotek revoked Calhoun's commutation on July 3rd. Investigators revealed they have found links between the deaths of Smith, Perry, Webster, and Reel. They said there is no active danger to the community at this time. Willamette Week published the first story identifying Calhoun as the potential serial killer.
And okay, let's talk terminology here. To be clear, Willamette Week is using the terms potential serial killer and suspect when talking about Jesse Calhoun in relation to these deaths. And they're calling him a suspect by citing sources within police departments. Now, we're calling Calhoun a person of interest. If Calhoun is charged with a crime in relation to any of these deaths, then we would move past person of interest to suspect. But again, right now, he has not been charged. And he's being held at a state prison on unrelated crimes, so he's not out in the community. In fact, we have video of his arrest in Milwaukee back on June 6th. Here you can see deputies surrounding a vehicle with Calhoun inside. Calhoun and his girlfriend were fueling up at a gas station along Southeast McLaughlin in Milwaukee. And Calhoun did not give up easily. The person who recorded it all didn't want to show his face or share his name, but he did tell us about the links Calhoun went to elude police.
I don't know how he made it through the 10 officers, but made it through cross traffic all the way down the river, hopped in.
Again, police or the district attorney have not said how Calhoun is connected to these 4 women, but people close to him have spoken up. Calhoun's girlfriend told a YouTuber that he knew 2 of the women. She says he and Ashley Reel had been dating on and off for about a year. She also said that Calhoun would give Bridget Webster drugs in exchange for sex, but she did not know how Calhoun was connected to Charity Perry or Kristen Smith.
So many questions.
Kristen Smith's mom says that she doesn't know how her daughter is connected to him either.
If they are linked, again, I don't know if they are. The police have not told me that specifically.
So as we work to learn any possible connection between Calhoun and the other two women, let's look at a relationship that Calhoun apparently did have with victim Ashley Rial. See, in November of last year, Rial filed an allegation of domestic violence against Calhoun. Her father, Jose Rial, told the Associated Press on Friday that he called police on November 11th after she showed up crying at his home in Portland. She told her dad that she'd been choked by Calhoun. She had marks on her throat, he said, and he took her to the hospital. Her father told the AP that police actually wanted Rial to help find Calhoun, but she was scared to do so. Now, court documents dating back to 2007 also shed more light on Calhoun's violent past involving an old girlfriend. She alleges that while drinking in a bar in Baker County, Calhoun grabbed her by the throat to the point that she couldn't breathe. A short time later, Calhoun punched the woman repeatedly in the head and arm. Court documents show that a year later, he was accused of pulling that same girlfriend off of a bike and dragging her 50 feet across a parking lot. Much more recently, Calhoun's accused of threatening the father of a new girlfriend's children. Now, we've said it a few times, and we will say it again. At this point, Calhoun has not been charged in connection to the deaths of these four women. And as Evan mentioned earlier, Calhoun was released from prison 11 months early in July 2021. Well, that's because former Governor Kate Brown commuted his sentence and the sentences of 40 others after they helped fight the historic 2020 Labor Day wildfires. And it should come as no surprise that Oregon Republicans have pounced on this story because of those commutations. Senate Minority Leader Tim Knopp released a statement last week that said this: even after leaving public office as America's most unpopular governor, Kate Brown's legacy continues to have dire consequences for Oregonians. If Jesse Lee Calhoun is found guilty of these murders, Kate Brown will have signed the death warrants of 4 innocent women in the name of second chances. Now, Oregon's Republican members of Congress even sent a letter to Governor Tina Kotek last week. Lori Chavez-DeRemer and Cliff Bentz wrote, "We urge you to review every single conditional commutation granted by Governor Brown to ensure no one is a victim of the former governor's reckless leniency." There's no word yet from Governor Kotek on if that's happening, but our friends over at the Willamette Week recently reviewed all of the records of the inmates who were released early, along with Calhoun, for fighting those 2020 fires. And we think that their findings are certainly worth your time. Okay, so here's the headline from Lucas Manfield. 11 of 41 inmate firefighters whose sentences got commuted picked up some subsequent felony charges. That's not counting suspected serial killer Jesse Calhoun, who has yet to be charged, in its line with broader rates from recidivism. That's what those numbers that we're seeing are. So here's a look at what they found. The headline explains it all well, but 11 of the 41 inmates who got out early were charged with felonies after being freed. That number could rise to 12 if Calhoun is charged. Willamette Week also found that 2 of the other inmates were charged with misdemeanors. 6 of the 41 inmate firefighters had convictions in Multnomah County, including Calhoun. 4 of those 6 have been accused of felonies since their release. That would become 5 again if Calhoun is charged in connection to any of these women's deaths. Now, Willamette Week dove into more details about Oregon's recidivism rate, which is a measure of if someone who's been released from prison reoffends. And their findings are pretty eye-opening. They even talked with the director of Oregon's Criminal Justice Commission, which recently released a report on how the state stacks up to others across the country when it comes to the recidivism rate. You can read Willamette Week's full article right now on their website, wweek.com. All right, let's go to a focus now on a follow-up story from our Eastern Oregon series that Pat Doris brought to you earlier this year. He spent 3 days in the eastern half of the state talking to people about the Greater Idaho movement and why many there want a divorce from the West metropolitan area. Now, as we've told you many times before, the Greater Idaho idea is a moonshot. right? There's almost zero chance that it would garner the approval it would need to actually split from Oregon and become part of Idaho. But the biggest issue at the center of this movement, according to the folks that we heard from, was about lawmakers in Salem just not listening to them or understanding their way of life. And at the time, Governor Kotek's office assured us that she would visit that part of the state to hear from Eastern Oregonians in person. It may have taken a few months, but the governor did head out to Grant County last week as part of her One Oregon listening tour. She's now visited 20 of Oregon's 36 counties, but we were especially interested in her visit to Grant County and specifically the city of John Day. That's where several of Pat's Eastern Oregon reports were based out of. One of the people that Pat spoke to in John Day was a woman named Shannon Adair, the owner of a downtown brew pub called 1188 Brewing Company. Well, it turns out that Governor Kotek and First Lady Amy Kotek Wilson had lunch at that very spot during their visit. So we got back in touch with Shannon to ask how it went with the governor and the First Lady and her takeaways from their lunch together. Well, Shannon mentions a fire, and that's because her brewery was damaged by a blaze that also burned several shops in downtown John Day back in April. Shannon wrote back to us saying they were very approachable, and Governor Kotek asked several questions about the fire as well as our rural area, from housing to volunteer firefighters to water and wastewater infrastructure. She was easy to talk to and listened to everything we brought up. She went on to say, as far as whether she can do anything to help, well, time will tell. There were no visible negative reactions to her that I saw. Really, it just felt like a nice lunch with nice people who were interested in hearing what we had to say. After lunch at the brew pub, the governor toured a construction area to talk with people in Grant County about efforts to increase housing production through 3D home printing. And following her visit, the governor released a statement of her own that reads, "It's been great to learn from our rural and frontier communities about what they're looking for from Salem and the creative solutions they've developed to get us to where we need to be. I look forward to continuing these conversations and bringing these lessons back with me to the Capitol." So now we want to know what you think about the governor's listening tour. Do you think there's real value in what she's doing touring the state, or is it all political spectacle? Maybe you're a little skeptical, thinking it's more for show. So let us know. Send an email to thestory@kgw.com, or you can call and leave us a voicemail at 503-226-5090. Up next here on The Story, Oregon's psilocybin program is up and running, but other states, well, they're nowhere near regulating the psychedelic substance in magic mushrooms. But in Washington, well, they're moving forward with studying the compound, and they want to see if it can be a treatment for mental health concerns. We'll explain when The Story returns. Oregon is the first state in the country with a regulatory framework for legal psilocybin services. Psilocybin is the psychedelic compound found in what's known as magic mushrooms. And Oregon's program has been up and running since the late spring, as people all along the supply chain are required to be licensed, meeting strict criteria every step of the way. It starts with manufacturers or people growing the mushrooms. There are at least 3 companies here in the state that are licensed to grow. Then the mushrooms are sent to labs to be tested for potency and to ensure that they're the right species. At least 2 labs are now licensed through the state. And after the lab approves that, well, then the growers can sell their mushrooms to service centers. Right now, there are at least 5 of those with licenses. And inside of those service centers are licensed facilitators. These sort of act like therapists who walk you through the experience of psilocybin. And the state has nearly 60 licensed facilitators so far. Now, we say at least that many of each piece of the supply chain because the online licensing directory where we got all this information, well, that's optional for people and companies to be part of. So, in other words, you can still have an active license and not show up on that list. So that's how things are going here in Oregon. And the psilocybin wheels are slowly starting to turn in the state of Washington. The University of Washington has the go-ahead now to start a trial on psilocybin to see if it can effectively be used to treat mental health. Christine Pei from our sister station, King 5 in Seattle, has the story.
Psychedelic magic mushrooms are still illegal in the state of Washington. Governor Jay Inslee signed a bill authorizing more research.
This bill also creates a pilot program through the University of Washington to let certain patients safely access psilocybin.
Dr. Nathan Sackett, a professor at UW Medicine, is leading the pilot project that will help develop and better understand psilocybin.
Which is really a way to help address questions around safety and efficacy for patient populations that are typically not studied.
Sackett is particularly interested in how psilocybin therapy will help people who grapple with 2 disorders at the same time, like PTSD and alcohol addiction.
If we can give them this treatment safely, then perhaps it can provide more confidence that we can give it safely to a larger patient population.
While magic mushrooms are decriminalized in Oregon and Colorado, lawmakers in Washington say more needs to be learned.
If they're going to get into the role of potentially widening access to this, we want to make sure that it's safe for all people involved.
So what does psilocybin do to the brain?
When one ingests psilocybin, or magic mushrooms as they're often called, the compound that has the most psychoactive effects is called psilocin. And psilocin enters into the brain and acts on serotonin receptors.
Serotonin is the brain chemical that regulates multiple bodily functions, including mood. The team will study how psilocybin interacts with the part of the brain that handles emotion and the part that handles reasoning and intellect.
It alters the communication between those 2 parts and gives us the opportunity to reevaluate our own kind of internal narrative, if you will.
Sackett does not recommend people take it on their own, even for therapeutic reasons.
The main therapeutic benefit comes in a controlled environment where you have the relationship with a therapist and someone who can help make meaning to the experience.
Most of all, UW researchers want to advance the science behind this potential treatment.
I think we're at a point where we are in desperate need for more treatments for folks struggling with mental health concerns and substance use disorders. And I'm hopeful that this sort of work will move the needle in that direction and give us more tools to work with patients moving forward.
That trial is slated to begin in January of 2025. So yeah, the wheels are turning in Washington, just slowly. The trial will be based in Seattle and will initially include 30 to 40 military veterans and first responders who've documented problems with PTSD and alcohol use disorders. Still to come here on The Story, we find something truly unique on the radio, but you won't hear them over the airwaves. Shady Pines Radio is the local station disrupting digital streaming. How we'll give you an inside look at the Pandemic Project turned Portland nonprofit that's curating and celebrating local talent.
Next at 6:30, he thought he was making just a little extra cash, but he unknowingly became a getaway driver.
Knocks on the door and says, "I'll throw you $20 in gas if you drive me out to my dad's house." He was acting weird. He was asking me to pay for him.
In a KGW exclusive, how what seemed like a simple ride turned into a police standoff after a man found out his friend had shot up a Portland hospital. Plus, the latest on wildfires burning around Oregon and Washington, and the small amount of rain for relief.
They call it a sonic playground where people can experiment, share ideas, and discover new sounds. What started as a way to perform and connect during the pandemic has grown into a massive community of creators and listeners. Shady Pines Radio recently earned second place in Willamette Week's Best Radio Station in Portland contest, and I got an inside look at a grassroots movement of streaming digital radio. This is really where all the magic happens, right?
This is our cabin.
In an eclectic Northeast Portland basement.
She did the woodworking herself, the wood panels.
That's so cool.
There's a disruptor in the age of streaming music on demand.
This is our studio. This is where we do our show.
Just heard The Angry Song.
Shady Pines Radio.
This is where all the magic really happens.
Yeah.
We run on your support, and we really appreciate all you do to keep us afloat here at Shady Pines Radio.
Couple hours.
Callie and Brian Bauer are the co-founders and executive directors.
That's right, folks. It's Sunday again, and it's time for nocturnal submissions. I'm Callie.
I'm Brian.
Shady Pines is a community radio station, providing a platform for creativity.
Yeah, there's so much talent in Portland, like not just the music scene, but like the poetry scene, the comedy scene. It's so strong here.
Streaming online or on the Shady Pines radio app, it's a station that expands your repertoire, diving into the unique, underground, and often unknown.
Spotify, you can hear anything on Spotify on demand. You can look up a song and get it immediately, and it'll even kind of predict your taste. But it takes away, like, what's missing from that is that element of surprise, like finding something that truly is new that is in no way related to what you would normally listen to. And you can only get that through that kind of element of randomness and human curation.
And it all started out of necessity.
The pandemic hit and shutdown happened and everything just ended.
Before COVID took over in 2020, Shady Pines was Brian and Callie's video production company. They'd host open mics around town.
We used to shoot some live recorded music videos in this little space here.
But when COVID closed the door on those live shows, Callie and Brian hoisted another one open.
We weren't going to see our community of, creative people on a weekly basis anymore. So our friend Zach suggested the idea of an online community radio station.
Check 1, 2, chicka choo choo.
They were on air by April in 2020, and they've been streaming since, growing from a group of friends to more than 100 DJs.
If people have an idea for a show and we like the idea, we'll teach them how to host their own radio show and, give them an hourly slot, and it's good to go.
I'll be like, oh, yeah, here I go, and I'm at a cherry tree, and I'm picking things.
DJs like Poor Boy and Jackie B.
So I got a slot where I do a reggae vibration. My show, actually, I try to incorporate a little bit of the history of the island Jamaica where I'm from, where I was born.
Every Saturday from 3 to 5 p.m., you can catch her show, Jackie B at the Controls, where she shares a piece of herself through reggae.
So I just try to bring that energy with the music, to share it so everyone can get a taste of it. If they can't make it there, they can get a taste,
Yeah.
Lucas Salazar, a.k.a. Poor Boy, hosts the Soju Hour.
This is it.
Think of it as modern-day, old-timey radio for short attention spans.
Into the group shower that we have planned for February.
I play all the characters on my show. Shady Pines Radio lets me do the Soju Hour every Sunday at 4, and it's just my way to wild out and put whatever I'm thinking, whatever I think is funny.
Gallons of honey. It's our February fun shower.
Poor Boy has been with Shady Pines since the early pandemic days.
The tie that binds is the local community aspect of it. And it's a very diverse community, not just Shady Pines Radio, but Portland and the Pacific Northwest. And so letting them all have a voice, that's what makes it special.
That's right. Thanks for joining us.
Curating a radio station built by local artists, cultivated in community.
Look at all that you've accomplished together. I think that's just such a cool thing to be able to do this together.
Well, it's really humbling because so many people are involved in this thing. It's not just the two of us. And it's the amazing part is the community that has rallied behind Shady Pines Radio and helps us make it happen.
Yeah, no matter what you're into, you will find something on Shady Pines Radio. And you can listen anytime on their app or at shadypinesradio.com. That's the end of our show. Thank you so much for watching. Stick around for the news at 6:30 and then join me for the good stuff at 7 o'clock. And I'll see you back right here tomorrow.